Hola amigos and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you're having an amazing day. I'm going to be doing an author reading for you today from my book, Her Perfect Hero, which is probably my favourite of the books that I've written so far. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing and press that like button and boop the notification bell, and that way YouTube will know to let you know when I have a new video up. Now, Her Perfect Hero is the story of Bronte Huntington. She's a romance writer and she is determined that she will wait as long as she has to until she finds her Prince Charming, her one. The only problem is that she's not very good at spotting the man who is absolutely perfect for her. I thought I would start at the beginning of this book because it's always nice to start at the beginning, isn't it? There is a bit where I trip over one or two of the words. They're really tricky words for me to say, so I wonder if you will spot which ones I mess up on. Chapter 1. At the end of a little lane, just over half a mile from the town of Nettlewood in Kent, there were two adjoined cottages. One stands empty and abandoned. It has no name. The other, Blackberry Cottage, so titled because of the abundant blackberry bushes at the bottom of its back garden, is clearly well loved. Its small front garden is beautifully tended, even in the leaf-wreathed grip of early autumn. Wild rambling roses grow up a bower over the red front door with its polished brass knocker. Bright curtains hang from the windows, and through one an enormous black cat stares out at the world. This cottage is the home of 30-year-old Bronte Huntington, a writer of romance and firm believer that her Prince Charming will be around very soon to sweep her off her feet. He's just been held up for a while. Inside her home, Bronte is collecting together her latest work, ready to present to her fortnightly writing group. She's running late, having got caught up, finishing off a tricky scene. She lets down her long brown hair from her work time bun. No time for full makeup. But her clear skin doesn't need it. Her face is almost line-free. She puts on just lipstick and a touch of mascara, a spritz of perfume, her scarf and hat to protect her against the nippy evening air, and she's ready and on her way. Little does she know that in the few hours she's gone, something very exciting will be happening next door. Bronte smiled as her friends called out a welcome to her from the corner they'd managed to commandeer for their meeting. The White Swan, the rather old-fashioned pub they met in, wasn't busy, but they usually liked to tuck themselves away as much as possible. None of them were exhibitionists when it came to giving readings and discussing their work. The group were known and respected by their fellow patrons, who did their best to leave them in peace, only listening in if something exceptionally gripping was read aloud by a particularly favoured author. Bronte looked forward to these gatherings. Living pretty out of the way and working from home, she'd often go days at a time without seeing anyone if she didn't make the effort to go down to the town. The writers were a diverse lot. Most of their offerings were far more literary than Bronte's romances, but that didn't seem to bother any of the other members, who looked forward to the regular instalments of her popular Scottish Highlands series, with its lairds of the manor and various damsels in distress being rescued, always within Bronte's allotted word limit. Once she'd bought herself a white wine, Bronte settled down on a bench next to her best friend Camille, a tiny, slim French woman with jet-black shoulder-length hair who wrote murder mysteries under the pen name Jack Sniper. Camille's novels were extremely bloodthirsty, and Bronte made sure she never read them when she was alone and it was dark outside. As the last few stragglers hurried in, they started the meeting proper. They began, as always, by going round the table so anyone could share any news. Bronte had performed the rather dispiriting task of deleting over 5,000 words from her latest manuscript and was much commiserated with. Next, those who wanted to could share their latest work with the group, who do their best to offer some constructive criticism. More often than not, this was gotten underway by the lovely Norman, a man closer to 80 than 70, who'd self-published his memoirs of life as a long-distance lorry driver. Upon retirement, he discovered that he and his wife Doreen didn't actually have very much in common, and writing was his escape from the constant DIY projects Doreen had ready for him and the threat of OAP coach trips to the coast. It was because of dear Norman that a rule enforcing 15 minutes of reading time maximum per author had needed to be introduced. The official meeting ended at 9, but a few of the younger members stayed behind for a final drink, so Bronte didn't make it back to Blackberry Cottage until after 10. Camille drove her home, and it was she who pointed out the lights on in the empty cottage attached to Bronte's own. "Do you want me to hang round and check everything's okay?" Camille asked. "It could be burglars, or a murderer escaped from prison and searching for his next victim," she added half-jokingly, allowing her writer's imagination to get the better of her. "I don't think a burglar or a murderer would turn quite so many lights on, especially as it's obvious my house is lived in," replied Bronte, sounding braver than she felt. Getting out of the car, along with Camille, who was adamant she wasn't leaving her friend alone until they knew just what was going on, Bronte stood at the twin gate, still debating what to do. The matter was taken out of her hands, however, when the chipped front door to the unnamed cottage opened. A voice called out, "Hello there," and a figure made its way along the dark path. The stranger was male and just an inch or so taller than Bronte in her heeled boots, making him about 5'6". He was so bundled up in layer upon layer of clothes that it was quite impossible to tell what his physique might be like underneath it all. His face was open and friendly, and peeping out from under the woolly hat he wore, pulled down low over his ears with bright ginger, could be related to a Weasley hair. "Is one of you Bronte?" he asked with a strong Irish lilt as he got to the gate and looked expectantly at both women in turn. "I am," replied Bronte, with one hand in her bag trying to locate her personal attack alarm, though she appreciated it was rather unlikely he planned to do her any harm, especially as he knew her name. "Great, I'm Ryan Murphy. My Aunt Joanna owns this cottage and told me about you. I'm a dentist and I've just started work at the practice in town. My aunt said I could stay here until I got myself settled." "Oh, well, it's very nice to meet you," said Bronte with a smile. She'd only met the wonderfully bohemian Joanna once, when she'd come to pick up some stuff she'd stored in her cottage, not long after Bronte had moved to the area. They'd discussed herbaceous borders and poetry over a cup of tea, and that had been the last Bronte had seen of her caftan-clad neighbour. It would be good to have next door occupied. It looked so sad and lonely sat there next to her own far cheerier home. "Let me know if there's anything we can do to help you get settled," piped up her friend, her usually light French accent thickening seductively in unconscious reflex of meeting a new man. "I'm Camille." Ryan took her outstretched hand. "Bronte's usually about. She works from home. Just knock on her door any time. I'm sure she'd always be pleased to see you," continued Camille pointedly. "Yes, thank you, Camille. Let's get inside. It's cold, and Ryan must have plenty to be getting on with. I'm sure he doesn't want to stay out here chatting to us all night," said Bronte, alarmed that her friend seemed to have got it into her head to try to set her up with her new neighbour. Saying a swift good night, Bronte ushered Camille into her cottage, almost tripping over the cat on the way in. "Be careful, Mr. Darcy," exclaimed Bronte, picking up her pet. "Did you miss me?" The cat's angry hiss and scramble to get out of his owner's arms suggested he had not, in fact, missed her company. His ensuing stomp to the kitchen to meow by his bowl revealed the real reason he'd left his spot next to the warm wood-burning stove to greet his mistress. Bronte gave him his food and attempted to scratch him behind his ears as he came to eat. He moved deftly out of the way, flicking his tail crossly. "You know," observed Camille, "it wouldn't surprise me if that animal had deliberately positioned itself to trip you up as you came in." "Don't be silly," said Bronte, putting the kettle on. "It seems to hate you," said Camille, eyeing Mr. Darcy suspiciously. "He's just aloof, like his namesake." Keeping watch on the cat, Camille took the tea Bronte handed her, and moving enough of her friend's scribblings out of the way so there was room to put her cup down, sat at the large oak kitchen table. "So, what did you think of Ryan?" Camille asked with a twinkle in her eye. "He seemed nice, friendly. He didn't mention anyone else coming to join him, so hopefully it'll just be him and he won't be too noisy," Bronte said non-committally. Yes, but what did you think of him? He's quite scrummy, isn't he?" "If you find small, bundled-up, red-headed Irishmen attractive." "Oh, come on, he was cute." Ignoring her friend's comment, Bronte continued, "And he's a dentist. Have you ever heard of a less sexy profession?" "Undertaker," replied Camille instantly. "Undertaker would be less sexy than dentist. Just imagine what you could get up to in his chair," she winked. "I hate going to the dentist, and I especially hate getting in the chair," said Bronte grumpily. "Won't you even consider him? You haven't been out on a date for ages." "Ryan Murphy is most definitely not my type," Bronte said with finality. by which you mean he isn't one of your fantasy lairds or actually Jane Eyre's Mr. Rochester himself, said Camille with exasperation. There's nothing wrong with having standards. There is if it means you won't give a decent man a chance, muttered Camille into her cup. Well, thank you very much for listening to that. If you would like to buy a copy of Her Perfect Hero, it's available from Amazon and the link is in the description below. So bye for now, and I will see you in the next one.